Imagine you need to have a tooth pulled. Or imagine something more serious, a shattered bone that needs to be reset, or an infected appendix. Today, the process is incredibly calm. A doctor rubs a numbing gel on your gums, or an anesthesiologist asks you to count backward from 10. A needle goes in, the lights fade, and you wake up an hour later. The problem is gone, and you didn't feel a thing. We treat pain as an optional bug in the human system. If something hurts, there is a pill, an injection, or a gas designed to turn it off. But the ability to temporarily turn off the human nervous system safely is only about 180 years old. For the thousands of years before that, humanity lived in a world where severe injury or illness meant facing a terror we can barely comprehend today. If a limb had to come off, you couldn't be asleep. You had to be there for it. So how did they survive it? The common myth is that ancient doctors just gave you a stiff drink, handed you a leather strap to bite down on, and brought out the saw. But human beings have never been passive about suffering. Since the beginning of recorded history, ancient cultures desperately sought out ways to numb the body. The problem wasn't a lack of trying. The problem was that the line between unconscious and dead is incredibly thin. Ancient Mesopotamians and Egyptians cultivated the opium poppy. Greek physicians used the mandrake root, a plant that contains powerful hallucinogens and sedatives. By the Middle Ages, doctors in Europe used something called the spongia somnifera, the sleep sponge. They would take a sea sponge, soak it in a mixture of opium, mandrake, hemlock, and mulberry juice, let it dry in the sun, and then reconstitute it with hot water before holding it over a patient's nose. If the mixture was perfectly balanced, the patient would fall into a deep stupor. But if the mixture was slightly off, the hemlock would stop their heart, and they would never wake up. Because ancient pharmacology was so dangerous and unpredictable, most surgeons simply didn't use it. Instead, the greatest anesthetic of the ancient and pre-Victorian world was something entirely different: speed. Before 1846, a good surgeon wasn't necessarily precise or gentle. A good surgeon was fast. In the early 1800s, a Scottish surgeon named Robert Liston became famous for his terrifying efficiency. As patients were held down by strong assistants, Liston could amputate a human leg from the first cut to the final stitch in under 3 minutes, sometimes in just 28 seconds. It was a brutal, bloody, deafening environment. Patients waiting in the halls of 18th century hospitals could hear the screams echoing from the operating theater. Many chose to suffer and die from their ailments rather than subject themselves to the surgeon's knife. To be human before the modern era was to accept that physical agony was a looming, unavoidable threat. But here's where the story shifts from biology to psychology. Because ancient humans didn't have a reliable way to turn off pain, they had to build a psychological framework to endure it. Today, we view pain as meaningless. It is just a biological alarm bell ringing loudly, and the goal is to smash the alarm. But ancient humans viewed pain as a fundamental texture of existence. It had meaning. In many cultures, pain was spiritual. It was a test of faith, a purification of the soul, or a payment for past sins. To endure it bravely was a mark of honor and character. Even the medical community believed pain had a purpose. Many 18th century doctors believed that a patient screaming on the table was actually a good thing. They viewed pain as a vital stimulant, proof that the life force was fighting to keep the body alive. Some doctors actively worried that if you somehow removed the pain of an operation, the body would simply forget to stay alive and slip away. Pain wasn't an error. It was the heavy tax you paid to be alive. That entire 8,000-year-old philosophy collapsed on a Friday morning in October 1846. Inside the operating theater at Massachusetts General Hospital, a dentist named William Morton held a glass flask containing a clear liquid, sulfuric ether. He had a patient inhale the vapors until the man fell asleep. Then, the head surgeon stepped forward and quietly removed a tumor from the man's neck. The patient didn't scream. He didn't thrash. He just slept. When the man woke up, he said he had felt a slight scratching sensation, but no pain. The lead surgeon looked out at the stunned, silent audience of medical students and uttered a phrase that changed human history. "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." Within months, ether and chloroform shipped across the globe. For the first time since the dawn of humanity, the surgeon's knife was silenced. The conquest of surgical pain is arguably the greatest medical miracle in human history. It allowed surgeons to slow down, to be careful, and to explore deep inside the human body, saving billions of lives. But also changed us. When we eradicated the terror of the operating room, we also began to lower our tolerance for everyday discomfort. Over the last century, we have slowly built a world where almost any physical friction can be medicated away. Headaches, muscle aches, the sting of a needle. We are the first generations of humans to expect a frictionless, painless existence as our baseline, right? We defeated our oldest, most terrifying enemy. But in doing so, we lost the ancient psychological armor we spent thousands of years building, the quiet human resilience of knowing how to endure.